The doorbell rings in Scotland. The resident of the 3-story house, Mrs. Wilson, opens the door. Standing in front of her is an unknown man. He asks for Mrs. Wilson's husband, Alistair. He would like to speak with him briefly and asks Mrs. Wilson to call her husband. She does so. When Alistair Wilson comes downstairs, he speaks briefly with the man. The man presses an envelope into his hand. Alistair is confused, but before he can figure out what the envelope and the strange visitor are all about, there is a loud bang. 3 times. Alistair Wilson has been shot in front of his own front door, and to this day, no one knows who his murderer is. It is November 2004. Alistair Wilson is 30 years old and happily married to his wife, Veronica. The Wilsons live at number 10 Crescent Road in Nairn, Scotland. They got engaged just 6 weeks after meeting in 1998 and were married shortly thereafter. Right from the start of their relationship, both knew they wanted to grow old together. Shortly after their wedding, they buy the house on Crescent Road. It has 3 floors and was once a small hotel. The Wilsons continued to run it as a bed and breakfast and restaurant for a few months, but soon closed down the business. Instead, Alistair and Veronica settled there to start a family. The couple have 2 sons together in 2004. Andrew is 4 years old, Graham is 2. Veronica's father lives in an apartment on the upper floor of the house. This means that the grandfather is close to his grandchildren and can help Alistair and Veronica look after the children. Veronica is a graphic designer. Alistair works at a local branch of the Bank of Scotland, where he holds a management position. He has been working there for 8 years, but his last day is in November 2004. He has accepted a job offer as purchasing manager at a research and consulting firm. Nairn is a quiet coastal town, a relaxing place where few tourists ever venture. The neighborhood is peaceful, the kind of area where you can go out late at night without worrying and don't even lock your doors. A local resident says, "I've lived here for 13 years and I've never even locked my door properly. Until Sunday, I always left it slightly open so my cat could get in and out, but not anymore." When the doorbell rings on the evening of January 28, 2004, Alistair is reading his 2 sons a bedtime story. The Wilson family spent the afternoon on an outing to Carbon Forest. Andrew and Graham are probably already quite sleepy when their father Alistair reads to them. He has just given them their bath, which is the Wilsons' evening routine. Alistair takes care of the children's evening routine while his wife Veronica tidies up. That's why she's the one who opens the front door at around 7 p.m. Standing at the door is a man, about 5 feet 7 inches, between 30 and 40 years old, with a stocky build and a clean-shaven face. He's wearing a baseball cap, a dark blue jacket, and dark jeans. Veronica does not know him, but the stranger apparently knows her husband, because he asks if he can speak to Alistair briefly. Veronica does not think much of it, goes upstairs, and tells Alistair that someone is downstairs who wants to talk to him. Veronica sits down with her sons and continues reading the story to them while Alistair goes downstairs to talk to the man. 2 or 3 minutes later, Alistair comes back in, holding an empty blue envelope. The first name Paul is written on the front. Alistair and Veronica talk briefly. What exactly is said in this conversation is being withheld for tactical reasons. All that is known is that it also concerns the mysterious envelope. Veronica reveals the following in an interview in 2017.
What can you tell us about this envelope?
Well, Alistair came back upstairs with the envelope, and as you know, had Paul on it, so he was just a bit bewildered as to what the gentleman had said, because the envelope wasn't addressed to him. And I said, no, he definitely asked for you by name. It wasn't addressed to himself, and that there was nothing in the envelope. He found that quite strange, and just said, you go back downstairs and see if the gentleman was still there.
Alistair decides to go back to the door to see if the stranger is still there. At this moment, he does not seem to be afraid for his family or his own life. He and Veronica find the situation strange, but not dangerous or scary in the least. Alistair calmly returns to the front door and opens it again. Shortly thereafter, he is dead. 2 shots hit Alistair Wilson in the face, another in the upper body. The father collapses in the porch of the house, and the perpetrator flees immediately when Veronica runs outside. She dials 911 and then rushes to the Havelock bar across the street to seek help.
I can't hear you. Do you want the fire, police, or ambulance? Oh my God! 10 Curtin Road. Who do you want to speak to? The fire, police, or ambulance? Police or ambulance. My husband's just been shot.
Some patrons from the bar, and also from a second bar nearby, notice Veronica. They follow her back to the Wilson house. A nurse is also among them. She attempts to administer first aid, but unfortunately, it is too late. Alistair Wilson dies from his serious injuries in the entrance to his own home. The police respond quickly. The streets around Crescent Road are cordoned off to catch the killer, but the perpetrator is already long gone. The last confirmed sighting of the killer was only a few meters from the crime scene, in the direction of Marine Road. Less than 100 meters away is the A96 expressway. This means he could have fled long before the roadblocks were set up. And that is probably what he did, because he has not been found to this day. No one knows who murdered Alistair Wilson and went down in Scottish criminal history as the doorstep killer. As mentioned, Nairn is a small, tranquil place, and when a murder occurs there, the shock is enormous. Not only is there fear that a murderer is on the loose, but rumors soon begin to circulate. People talk about a random killing, then about a contract killer, and then there are rumors about a speedboat found on the nearby Black Isle. The latter leads to speculation that the perpetrator may have fled in this speedboat, as the Moray Firth, which leads directly to Black Isle, is located near the Wilsons' house. The speedboat is examined, but no connection can be established to the murder of Alistair Wilson. Incidentally, the strange blue envelope that the perpetrator gave Alistair shortly before the attack has disappeared. It is believed that the shooter must have taken it with him, perhaps because it could contain his fingerprints or DNA. 10 days after Alistair's murder, the murder weapon is found in a drain near the Wilson family home. A city sanitation worker comes across it while routinely cleaning the drains in the area. The murder weapon is a Hennel Schmeisser, a German handgun from the 1920s. It is a small weapon, also known as a pocket pistol due to its size. At first, the finder even thinks it is a toy. When he takes a closer look and realizes that it is real, he immediately takes it to the police. Although they are certain that it is the murder weapon, no fingerprints or similar evidence can be found. In 2017, the police announced that they found an exact replica of the murder weapon in 2016 during a house clearance in Nairn, the town where Alistair Wilson was murdered. This is particularly interesting because this weapon is extremely rare in the United Kingdom. Between 2008 and 2017, only 13 of these weapons were seized by the police. The fact that someone in Alistair's hometown of all places has an exact replica of the murder weapon is very striking. However, there has been no news about the find since then. It can therefore be assumed that this lead has come to nothing, just like many other leads in this case. The murder of Alistair Wilson is becoming one of the most mysterious cases in Scottish criminal history, and it is taking almost 20 years for the investigation to pick up speed again. Veronica Wilson suspects that her husband must have been the victim of a deadly case of mistaken identity. She cannot explain her husband's murder any other way, nor can she explain the name Paul on the empty envelope. However, her theory is not supported by the fact that the man at her front door specifically asked for Alistair. Why did this man give Alistair an envelope that was intended for Paul? Was Alistair acting as some kind of messenger? But if so, who is Paul and why was the blue envelope empty? These are all questions that remain unanswered to this day. Veronica Wilson herself has been ruled out as a suspect. She had nothing to do with her husband's murder. In 2022, 18 years after Alistair's murder, new information has come to light. The Scottish police believe they have identified a motive for the murder of the family man. And that, in turn, could narrow down the circle of suspects. According to this, the motive is not, as previously suspected, related to Alistair's work for the Bank of Scotland, but to a private dispute. Before his murder, there was reportedly an argument between Alistair and persons unknown. According to this, a terrace was added to the Havelock Hotel opposite the Wilsons' house. This was in the summer of 2004, just a few months before Alistair's death. The terrace was used as additional space for the hotel's pub. However, the owner did not register this extension until after it had been built. He was granted permission to use the outdoor area. However, the authorities asked the neighbors to come forward if they had any objections. Alistair did indeed complain and lodged an objection with the local council. In his letter of objection, Alistair stated the following: "The terrace was used to serve food and drinks during the pub's opening hours, even late at night when the bar doors were open, which led to constant noise pollution and disturbance. Beer glasses and broken glass were found in the garden areas and on the street. In summer, my family and I felt uncomfortable using the front door or looking out of the windows because guests kept staring back at us." On the Thursday before he was murdered, the relevant authority forwarded this complaint to the hotel owners. On Sunday, he was killed. In that 3-day period, the letter could have arrived at the hotel and Alistair's objection could have become known. But can a disagreement over a terrace really be the motive for the cold-blooded murder of a family man? The police make it clear that they do not believe the owner of the Havelock Hotel is a suspect. Andy Burnett, as he is called, was in a bar called the Shambles on the evening of Alistair's murder. It is located on the same street as the Havelock Hotel and the Wilsons' house. When panic breaks out outside and people run to Alistair's house, Andy also arrives. He later tells the police that he initially thought there had been a shooting in his hotel bar. When he realized that the incident was taking place in the Wilson residence across the street, he went over to the front door. He knew Veronica and Alistair. He had even played golf with Alistair once. Andy Burnett no longer lives in Scotland. He sold the Havelock Hotel in 2013 and emigrated to Canada. In 2022, Scottish police officers traveled there to question Andy again about the Alistair Wilson murder case. The interrogations lasted 4 days. Andy had already stated in an interview in the mid-2000s that he was under investigation. He confirms that the letter with Alistair's complaint about a terrace arrived at his home on Saturday, 1 day before Alistair was shot. However, no suspicion of foul play can be established against Andy Burnett. He is being questioned as a witness, not as a suspect. Instead, investigators suspect the perpetrators of the construction company that was commissioned to build the terrace, or among Andy Burnett's customers. This is because Alistair's complaint was also discussed among the regulars at the Havelock Hotel bar before his murder. The investigator in charge said the following in 2022. Shortly before his murder, Alistair had objected to the construction of a large terrace in the parking lot of the Havelock Hotel directly opposite the family home, as he believed it would cause increased noise and litter in the area. The canopy was erected in the summer of 2004, and at the time of the murder, a retrospective planning application had been submitted. Although we cannot rule out any scenario, We believe this could be relevant to our investigation, and I would ask anyone with information on this matter to come forward and speak to officers. The police have a specific suspect in their sights, a man from Nairn with a history of drug offenses. However, the evidence against him has not yet been sufficient to bring charges. At the time of Alistair's murder, he was reportedly working for the emergency services. According to information obtained by the BBC, this man, whose name is known to journalists, is linked on social media to Andy Burnett, the owner of the Havelock Hotel. Former neighbors also confirm that he was a regular customer at the Havelock and owned firearms. Around the time this information becomes known, the police change the age of the suspect. Initially based on Veronica's description, the suspect was said to be between 30 and 40 years old. Now, however, the Scottish police say the perpetrator was between 20 and 40 years old, and the unnamed suspect reported in 2022 was exactly 20 years old at the time of Alistair's murder. However, an acquaintance of his told the BBC that the suspect was definitely not stocky at the time, and that was an explicit detail that Veronica Wilson remembered well, namely, that he was stocky. But even in this respect, the investigators' statements have changed. They now assume there were two perpetrators. Even if Veronica's description does not match the suspect exactly, he could still have been involved as an accomplice. But to date, no evidence has been found against him or anyone else. And so the doorstep murder of Alistair Wills remains unsolved to this day. Veronica Wilson still lives in the house where her husband was shot dead on the doorstep in 2004. One of Alistair's sons, Andrew, said in 2022 that he could still remember the image of his father lying lifeless in his own blood. It is not only his last memory of his father, but also his only one. At the time, Andrew was only 4 years old, and his little brother Graham was 2. There must be at least one person who knows exactly what happened to Alistair Wilson on November 28, 2004. I hope that these people will eventually come forward and the case can be solved. In the meantime, feel free to write your theories about the Alistair Wilson case in the comments. What do you think happened? Do you believe his wife's theory that he was simply mistaken for someone else? Or do you think it was a targeted murder? I look forward to reading your thoughts. Other than that, there isn't much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.